Good evening. It's 5:30 and I will commence this meeting of the Planning Committee. Welcome to this evening's meeting. I am Councillor Ellis Brown and I shall be chairing part of this evening's meeting, and I shall be supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor van der Boer, and the professional officers. There are a number of changes to the Planning Committee which I shall cover in item 4 on the agenda. Thank you for attending this evening. May I remind members of the public this is not a public meeting, but a meeting in which the public are present. Therefore, it's not a forum for public to ask questions or challenge points raised during the debate by officers and members of the committee. And you should not engage with members or call out during the meeting. If you have requested to speak, when invited to do so, please keep to your allotted time. And it will be timed, by the way. Your comments must also be material in planning terms so the decision being considered by the committee. We are not expecting a fire drill this evening, so should you hear the alarm, please make your way to the nearest exit, which is to the back and at the side there. And we are to meet outside the public house, which I can never remember the name of. Lynn Cross, thank you. Well, as I mentioned before, it's because I'm teetotal. May I also remind council members and members of the public to please switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent. Remember to turn on your microphones when speaking and turn them off when you have finished. I'd also remind everyone here this evening, please show respect to one another throughout the meeting. Thank you. When voting, members should make sure their arm is clearly raised so that we can actually capture the vote. Before we proceed, could the officers presenting this evening please introduce themselves, starting with the officers on my right.
I'm Guy Everest, the applications team leader.
It's Matthew Paulser, Senior Planning Officer.
Emma Parks, the Head of Development and Building Control.
Claire Brown, Principal Planning Solicitor.
Monica Balaj, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. Moving to the agenda item number 1, apologies for absence.
We received apologies from Councillor Roger Noel, therefore his substitute is Councillor Ellen Menton.
Thank you. I'll share with the public the substitute in a moment or two. Item 2 is minutes to approve the minutes of the previous Planning North Committee held on the 1st of April, with the exception of the exempt minutes. Can I take those as agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Declarations of members' interest. Any declarations of interest? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Livingston, sorry.
I just want to make it clear that the first application is within my ward and that I will be not voting on the application, but I will remain in the room to debate. That's how I understand the new rules are.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you, Councillor Livingstone. So I have someone now. Oh, sorry, Councillor Trott, apologies.
Yeah, it's similar for me on item 8, and people who know my background will know that I have an affiliation in that area. So I will stay in the room for the debate.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier about there have been several changes to the structure of Planning Committee, and I'll cover a few for the benefit of the public and those watching the live stream. We now only have one Planning Committee covering the whole of the district. Members of the public invited to speak can do so for 3 minutes as opposed to 2, and I trust that you've been prompted that you have 3 minutes. For each councillor, there is a nominated substitute who will attend if the elected committee member is absent, and that's the issued case this evening, where Councillor Manton is here as a substitute for Councillor Noel. To maintain the political balance, the nominated substitute must be a member of the same political party as the committee member. Ward members cannot vote, as we've just heard, on an application within their ward. However, they can speak for 5 minutes. There are 2 applications this evening in my ward, and for those, the Vice Chair will chair the meeting for those 2 items. This will allow the Vice Chair to have a casting vote should the vote be tied. I shall not be asking the ward members to open or close the debate on a particular application we've done in the past within their ward, but they can comment on the application. Thank you. Any questions at all? No? Good. Item number 5, appeals. Any comments on the appeals? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to item number 6, which is DC 241763, land opposite Brick Lane, Kiln Close, Handcross Road, Plumbers Lane. This is in the ward of Nuthurst and Lower Beeding, and we've just heard that Councillor Livingstone will not be voting on this, as it is his ward. Thank you very much. Could the officers please make their presentation? We've just lost the screen, so we're not able to share the presentation. Okay. It is the 13th, by the way. Any Tresque decaphobiacs here? Yeah, or just one? That's what most engineers do, apparently. Okay, you want to call a break? Okay, there will be a short adjournment while we try and resolve. Oh, no. Geez, that was the magic phrase, wasn't it? So there'll be a short adjournment.
Right, sorry about the false start. So good evening, members. You will note that there was an addendum to this application which addresses new matters arising since the publication of the committee report.
Councillors, please. Thank you.
Firstly, the Horsham District Council has since published its latest authority monitoring report, and this evidence that the shortfall in housing delivery has worsened since the publication of the report. The council can now only demonstrate 1 year against its 5-year housing land supply requirement, as opposed to the 2.9 years reported. Secondly, the applicant has provided a technical report detailing pump testing at Timbery Farm, and this evidence findings which confirm that reported in the committee agenda the position of officers on certainty of the off-site borehole in demonstrating water neutrality. And thirdly, there's also clarification that the treated surface water from the development will discharge to the adjacent watercourse. So on the main presentation, so this is a full planning application for 30 new residential homes, including access and related works, and the site is outlined red on the slide, within the setting of the high-wheeled national landscape. The council's current development plan includes a settlement hierarchy ranked on appropriateness to accommodate growth, with Lower Beeding ranked as a smaller village. So as shown on the slide currently, the site is northeast of the settlement, immediately abutting the built-up area boundary. Public right-of-way number 1709 exists on the west boundary, and number 2832 south of the site. Listed buildings, Holy Trinity Church and the Plough Inn exist to the southwest. So on the slide currently, the Lower Beeding Neighbourhood Plan has endorsed part of this application site for 14 new homes with associated access. That's subject to criteria which the proposal, in your officer's view, complies with. On the current slide now, the emerging Horsham District Local Plan, which remains the Council's own agreed policy position, has endorsed the entirety of the application site for 30 new homes. That's based on a housing need evidence that's more up to date than the neighbourhood plan, and also subject to criteria which, in your officer's view, the proposal complies with. So on the current slide, you've got both of those endorsements shown together, and in the officer's view, this supports the council's view as reported in the committee agenda, that the site is sustainably located for the access to the services and amenities of the settlement and suitable for new homes. But notwithstanding that, there's a recognition that the proposal at present is a departure from an aged development plan in the context of a neighbourhood plan that's not yet made. So moving on to the site photographs, as shown, it compromises disused fields with succession vegetation, and the site is bounded by, to the west, public right-of-way footpath 1709 is shown, and residential dwellings, the closest being Homely, with bedroom windows facing east onto the site. And east of the site is Church Lane, a classified D road as shown, and to the south is the B2110. So in this proposal, the site layout shown, we've got 35% affordable homes, which satisfies local plan requirements, and the open market and the affordable homes are a range of sizes and tenure to accord with local need, with access to on-site open space which exceeds the standards, and the proposal will be drained in a sustainable means to the satisfaction of the flood authority. So as shown on the current slide, when you have the site layout overlaid with the current draft allocations, you can see that the site layout's been informed by retention of boundary hedges and trees, with ecology interests that are protected, with biodiversity net gain, and the proposal's been designed in response to the rural edge eastwards and the national landscape setting qualities and the safeguarding of the neighbours' amenities as all reported. There's limited intervisibility qualities between the development and the setting of the heritage assets, with adverse harm to their significance avoided. So in terms of site access, this will be by a new formalised junction on the north side of the B2110, alongside the off-site highway works on both sides of the B road to enhance active travel connectivity. Given the recorded 85 percentile speeds, the new access works are designed to ensure the visibility achieved is beyond what's required by the Highway Authority, with swept path analysis and stage 1 road safety audit all undertaken. So on all highway matters, and that includes crossing the road safety in general, provision of the 72 car parking spaces and the cumulative impact upon the local road network. This is all to the satisfaction of your officers and the local highway authority, who raises no objection. And because of that circumstance, a controlled crossing of the B2110 is judged not necessary to make the the proposal acceptable in planning terms. So regards to the habitat regs and the Arun Valley sites, the proposals demonstrated water neutrality with a proposed solution involving on-site efficiencies and obtaining water credit from an off-site borehole. This is the same borehole that members previously endorsed for another scheme. And bringing together all those issues and applying the planning balance, the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. On its latest own findings, it can only demonstrate 1 year. And the applicant submits mitigations to address all the material considerations where necessary and reduce the harms set against the benefit the scheme brings. And that includes duties relevant to the national landscape setting. And so in overall summary, the submitted scheme delivers sustainable development when assessed against national policy, and the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. Invite the first public speaker this evening, and Richard Smith, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you for the update that we just received. I think also thank you for acknowledging that this doesn't conform with the neighbourhood plan, and you used the word aged, and we all know why that is aged. But I think I express my own sort of concern and that of other people within the parish that the neighbourhood plan has been ignored in this case. The second macro point I'd like to make is the ever-increasing pressure that is being placed on the parish. You've rightly identified that this is a small village. There's already one major development for the size of the village. This is another one. And despite assurances, we've seen no increase or uplift in resources or support to the community. I know you'll say that is distinct from this planning meeting, but I think it can't be considered in complete isolation. It is a small village. This is yet another larger development than was originally sort of agreed during the neighbourhood plan. I want to move now quickly, because I've only got 3 minutes, to the specific concerns that I'd like to raise. The first is to do with screening and shielding around the site. The current residents will be keen to get more detail and assurance that that screening and shielding will be in place not just when the site is mature, but during the construction. It'll obviously go from currently what is a field to a public space and buildings. So some assurance or conditions around shielding, ideally in the form of natural shielding for the site and the green area. The second concern I'd raise is a personal concern. The parking areas, 72 parking areas, are concentrated around the current development. Given that the proposal is to concrete over most of the field anyway, I don't understand why the parking has to be so close. So I'd like consideration given to moving the car parking spaces into the areas which are going to be concreted and tarmacked over anyway, allowing further green space and buffering from the current residences. And then finally, you mentioned the road crossing. You highlighted the fact that there is no requirement for a controlled crossing. The planning application does refer to uncontrolled crossings. I'd like some more clarity, if possible, on what those will be, where they will be. All the facilities, the limited ones, and primarily the primary school and the recreation area are on the other side of that road. And while people will tell you that it is a 30 zone, it is. There is no traffic calming between the 50 to the 30, and it is a straight road. It is a fast road. I live on it, and I would have concerns about that number of predominantly family homes without suitable crossings. So in summary, specific to this application, assurance of adequate screening and buffering from the current residences, ideally green, to keep in keeping with what's currently there. Consultation regarding the parking spaces, where they are, and whether they can be moved further into the development, allowing us to retain some of that green space, and then some assurances or confirmation of what the uncontrolled crossings that are proposed, and I believe there are 2 of them, would look like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to come back? Yeah.
I'll wait to the end.
Okay. Thank you. Peter Knox, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to point out that I was on the neighbourhood plan team, and still am, and Field A of Glade Farm was dismissed initially because of the flooding issues on that field. The north end of the field, adjacent to the north end of the field, is where I live. So the water comes from the north end of the field, comes into my garden, which is then I've made a pond to capture the water, and then the water then from a sluice I have in the pond runs down the adjacent to Church Lane. That water is a small tributary of the River Arun, and so there is a flooding issue, a wetland flooding issue to the north end of that field. So the concern is that it is flooding, and whether the SUDS has been thought out properly for the site, I'm not convinced, because my concern is that if it's not done properly, that eco structure that's already in place in Field A, there's quite a lot of eco insects and mammals involved in that. And also in my pond, I have moorhens and ducks, fish, that will damage the eco structure of the field and the ponds, and also the water that goes, or the tributary of the River Arun. So I just like confirmation that that will be an undamaged eco structure for that field. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Laurie Ecott, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. My name is Laura Ecott and I'm the planning consultant on this application. Olivia Holmes and the project team have worked diligently in conjunction with your officers and statutory consultees to develop the attractive and sympathetic proposals that are before you today. If approved, the proposals will provide 30 new homes, including 11 affordable. The proposals include a mixture of dwelling types, sizes and tenures, which have been supported by the housing officer. The site was identified as being suitable for residential development by the Council's planning policy team, resulting in the draft allocation of the site for 30 dwellings in the submitted local plan. This is supported by a considerable evidence base. The applicant has worked collaboratively with officers to achieve a design and layout that reflects the character of the area. Extensive engagement with officers has been undertaken and resulted in a number of design changes since the applicant's original submission. These changes include a reduction in the quantum of development to provide transition to the countryside in the eastern part of the site, increased roof pitches to reflect design guidance for sites within the setting of the national landscape, a designated ecological enhancement area, and an increase in the number of 3-bed affordable homes. These design changes have resulted in the application receiving no objections from any statutory consultees and an overall recommendation for approval from the case officer. The proposals will further deliver several important benefits, namely the provision of much-needed market and affordable housing, the delivery of affordable housing slightly beyond policy requirements, the provision of public open space beyond policy requirements, the delivery at least 10% biodiversity net gain, the delivery of new and upgraded pedestrian crossing facilities, providing improved access to the village and wider public right-of-way network, the provision of £23,000 for resurfacing and provision of stiles to 2 public footpaths near the site. This application should be determined in the context of an out-of-date local plan, no made neighbourhood plan and a 1-year housing land supply position. Lower Beeding's emerging neighbourhood plan was prepared under very different circumstances to those that exist today. It is based on an out-of-date local plan and evidence base. there have been significant policy changes since its examination in 2021, most notably the increase in the Council's housing delivery targets from 917 dwellings per year to 1,357. This is an overall increase of nearly 48%, meaning additional development is required across the district. To conclude, there are no statutory consultee objections to the proposal. The site is sustainably located and is within walking distance to the village facilities. It is clear there is a significant need for housing in the district, and it is the Council's duty to allow suitable planning applications to meet the identified demand under paragraph 11D of the NPPF. Your officers have concluded that the proposals are acceptable in planning policy terms, and I therefore respectfully request that the application be approved in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now call upon Councillor Leslie Bamford, Lower Beeding Parish Council, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am here speaking on behalf of the Lower Beeding Parish Council. This statement is in opposition to the application for Glade Farm and the proposal to build 30 new dwellings in our village. I have 3 specific points I'd like to cover in this brief 5-minute statement. Firstly, how this application is in conflict with our agreed neighbourhood plan. Secondly, the lack of engagement with the parish and the parish council by the developers, Olivia Homes. And lastly, a recommendation for an extension of the biodiversity protection that is currently proposed on the site. For a little bit of background, like many of the other parishes in the region, Lower Beeding started the process of developing a neighbourhood plan back in 2015. Now, after more than 10 years of our work and the expense of more than £30,000 to the residents of our parish, we have an agreed plan that protects the ethos of our small village. Back then, before joining the council, I was the chair and the head of the neighbourhood plan and that working party, so I know firsthand how much hard work we and other members of the parish residents, including Peter, put into that plan. This application at Glade Farm would exceed the requirement for the number of dwellings to be brought forward for Lower Beeding and placed in our small rural village. Sandygate Lane development of the Gallops is currently in the building process. It was approved last year, and that's adding currently 25 additional homes to the village. That's a 6% increase. We have a housing, current housing is 400 units in Lower Beeding. Glade Farm would add an additional 8% increase, or just more than 8%. So a combined of nearly 15% increase in housing is of what is classified as a small rural village. This demand exceeds even current expectations for a village of our size. That's the first reason why we would request the Planning Committee to refuse this site in its current form. The second reason that we request the committee to refuse the Glade Farm application in its current state is that the developers of Olivia Homes have not fully engaged with the residents of the parish or with the parish council. Developers did not accept, they did initially accept an invitation to meet with the council back in September of 2024, but requests for any alterations to the site have been ignored. Any further requests from us as the parish council to hold discussions and to engage with the developers have not been responded to by Olivia Homes. One specific request, for example, was for not only moving the parking, as Rich mentioned, but an increase in the parking allocation across the site, because while the site is compliant with some basic standards for the district, this minimum requirement does not meet the needs of the residents who live in a rural district with limited bus services, no train station, no local services like a shop or a doctor's surgery or a chemist. The development at Glade Farm, as proposed, would not meet the needs of the residents of the parish who would live there. Lastly, currently just one portion of the allocated site is labeled for biodiversity protection. The parish council is putting forward that this protection should be extended to the entirely currently undeveloped portion of the site. So we would be talking about the northern part of the site that is currently not planned for development, and also the eastern section of the site, which would have, let's see, Handcross Road to the south, Church Lane to the east, neighboring the residential property of Bede Cottage to the north. Currently, this land in the site is not protected for its biodiversity qualities, and therefore the Parish Council requests that the application being put forward in its current state not be approved. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come back on the points?
Yeah, so just come back on hopefully the majority of those points. So just dealing with the flooding, there's been back and forth with the applicant, the council and the flood authority on amendments to the drainage strategy. Most recently in March this year, when the data sets published by the Environment Agency got changed, and the area that the speaker was referring to in this corner here, where there was some surface water risk. I don't know if you can see my cursor, you probably can't. It's in the north-east section by the natural depression in the site and the neighbouring property to the north, that area there.
Oh, that screen's not working.
So on a point of order, Chairman, we've got us up there. We'd rather have the map up there if possible, please.
Members did say about.
So basically that issue has been resolved through back and forth with the flood authority, and they're satisfied that the surface water can be treated without exasperation of flood risk outside of the site. That's the test for planning. The ecologist has looked at the suite of evidence submitted with this application, and that includes the most up-to-date drainage strategy and doesn't raise issue about potential impact on ecology off-site. In terms of the uncontrolled crossings, so this is detailed in the committee report at paragraph 6.84. As also shown on the slide there, so you've got the formalised new access, but also in addition at the request of officers of the council here, but also the local highway authority, there is betterment to pedestrian access south of the road. So that allows for more ease of pedestrian connectivity to the facilities on the other side of the road, plus also the wider right-of-way network, and also across an existing access to the church. So that those measures are considered proportionate to the scale of development. As already explained, there isn't a justification both in safety but also in terms of movement crossings over the road to require a signalised crossing. In terms of the landscape buffers, so one of the important things, because this application is a departure, there is a need to have accordance with our FAD, which is abbreviation of facilitating appropriate development document, which requires that developments are adequately screened and the boundary treatments are robust. So that's the case here, where you've got a very strong buffer on the western boundary to public right of way. You've got buffers to the south where the residential properties are. You've got the central existing hedgerow, field hedgerow retained with a buffer between the existing properties and those immediately to the east, and also to the north you've got vegetation retained, and along Church Lane as well. So, as well as the B road. So all around the perimeter of this site there is landscape buffering evidenced within the site layout and secured through the suite of conditions. Probably not worth stating them all, but for example, we've got a condition for landscape management plan, condition 15, advanced planting at condition 17, and also hard and soft landscaping at condition 22. 15 and 17, those are pre-commencement. So it's a recognition that the buffers are important, both for visual character and protection of residential amenities. So there's an extra step in which the applicant has to undertake, which is to put that planting in at an agreed early stage for it to mature in time for the development to be completed and occupied, to try and reduce those harms and also to give better protection longer term. I wasn't quite sure what the speaker from the parish was talking about when they said biodiversity protection. I think they were referring to the biodiversity net gain, which I'll have to move to another slide. So where you've got the red line shown and you've got that sort of slightly awkward shape, that's the attenuation basin. But beyond that, that triangular field to the north, that's where the biodiversity net gain will be provided. So it's off-site, but it will be protected under a 30-year guarantee, which is standard to gain. The field between that and the application site is outside of the application site, so it's not within the control of this application to safeguard that. In terms of the eastern side, this is a balance between securing off-site amenity and the benefits of having immediate access to that, and also a requirement to provide it as part of the development to make it acceptable, and the biodiversity protection of the ecology interests, and also some of the gain on here as well, because the gain isn't entirely off-site. There is some on the northern end, and you can see, you may not be able to make it out very clearly, but the northern end of that eastern buffer is to be fenced off and provided as protection. So again, 30-year protection, because it's part of the gain offer. To the south, we've got the amenity, which is through a managed land obligation under the legal agreement for the estate management company to maintain. So whilst perhaps it's not explicit within the presentation that these areas will be protected, there are various checks and controls through what these areas are trying to achieve, to making sure that they're not necessarily built on within this development in itself and the scope of that. Yeah, so in terms of the neighbourhood plan, obviously I think again the language when it says it's been agreed, the neighbourhood plan is not yet made, and also it is without a referendum date yet. It's based on housing evidence back in 2018, whereas our local plan emerging was based on more up-to-date housing evidence. And obviously, as everyone's aware, the housing needs of the district have changed considerably since 2018. So I don't think what's been said in the report is to say that the local plan is ignored. I think there's a recognition that it's not in not in compliance with the limited provision of housing that's provided or proposed within a not yet made plan, but nonetheless there are benefits which mean that there's a need to consider the appropriateness of the departure in this case, which I hope is conveyed in the report.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open the application to debate by the members. Any members? Councillor Livingston, yes.
Good evening, Chair and councillors. First of all, I'd like to thank the Planning Officer for a very detailed and thorough report. Lower Beeding is in the ward I represent. It's a very small parish, and to classify Lower Beeding itself as a small village, well, I would say it's a tiny village. They have already accepted a number of developments that is potentially, it's increasing its size quite dramatically for the village itself. There are a limited lack of local facilities, no shops, no dentists, but that's almost standard in rural areas. The neighbourhood plan, which I have a copy here, has been around for a while, and I personally sat on the adjacent parish neighbourhood plan, and that was the start of my route to actually getting involved in local government. Now, I believe it would have been fully made if it wasn't for the water neutrality issue. So it's a timing problem with regard to the water neutrality. So you can understand how disappointed the residents and the parish council are when they now see that the development they put forward is now going to be doubled in size. Now, the developers held a meeting with the parish council, but failed together with Horsham District Council to respond to questions and issues the parish council had raised. The proposal before you was developed after only one meeting with the parish council, and they then shunned further collaboration. The PC was not informed of changes or their opinions after that one initial meeting. As local government reorganisation moves forward, parish councils are the true voice of their communities, and we must not ignore in planning terms. Now, the current plans before you, I will recognise that our officers have worked hard to mitigate some of the issues. But I think there's still a number of items that I think should be resolved. Firstly, we've mentioned about the undeveloped portion of the land on the eastern side. That is a very important area. It relates to the drainage and water dispersal through to the adjacent properties and down into Church Lane. The delightful neighbouring garden has constructed the landscape with this in mind, with waterways and ponds, and it is truly beautiful. Can this portion of the land be secured to prevent it from further development? I understand about with the BNG and the 30-year thing, but can we actually have another means to prevent another application coming forward to fill that piece of land? The next issue is the buffering screening. And I can see that we've done some work and tried to ensure there's adequate buffering and screening to some parts of the development. And that's during construction and completion. And I noted condition 17 for advanced planting of trees. Now, I also think to the north of the boundary, there should be some more additional planting to shield the views of those properties from the construction works and the final the houses when erected. Now, we've talked about affordable housing. We need some confidence that this will be delivered. We're in a rural area. Has a housing association expressed any interest for the affordable rental units for this small village? Next item is crossings. East and west are proposed uncontrolled. I'm still not sure what uncontrolled means. Is that simply drop curves or is that a zebra crossing? So I would like some clarification for that. And can the replacement of these be consulted with the parish council so that it is advantageous for all the residents of this tiny village? How do we ensure that these will be built as well? Because I don't see a condition that it will be built. Will there be a S106 agreement? And who actually does this work? Next item is disruption during the construction stage. Can the site access and operating times be covered by condition? Can we specify the third-party monitored considerate contractor scheme? And the next item is environmental considerations. Our local plan, the future local plan, which is in dispute with the inspectorate at the moment, talks about provisions of solar panels and heat pumps. And you know, we specifically require these facilities to be considered. But I see no mention of it in these documents. Finally, the car parking. I think small amendments to the plan would improve certain areas by moving the parking away from existing residence locations. So they can try to maintain a sort of country rural area in the properties they live in. I think for now that is all I need to put forward.
Thank you very much.
Yep, I'll do that in reverse to the matters raised. So I think what the councillor's referring to is the parking perhaps in front of these units to the existing neighbours, so those immediately north, because that's where there is a parking turning area, but it's not immediately abutting the boundary. You've got a buffer there of such width to allow for structural vegetation and trees to provide some relief from parking movements. I think it's also an issue raised by one of the speakers earlier. I'm not sure where else you can provide it without looking entirely again at the concept, because obviously we have to balance the need to locate the parking in a convenient and appropriate place for the new occupiers whilst protecting those amenities of existing. So I think we've got the balance right here, and I would be concerned if we had to shift a lot of that parking elsewhere, because it would almost require a rethink of how those layouts parcels are designed and potentially require a new scheme. I don't think that's a step that's necessary, because those impacts are reduced sufficiently with that landscape buffer.
Can I respond?
Can we just come back to all the questions first?
Yeah, let the officer answer all the questions first, and then you can come back, councillor.
So on the renewables, that's a standard that's emerging through our local plan. So it's not a prerequisite or a requirement under the current policy. So whilst we would always encourage those, we can't insist on them. There is an energy statement that accompanies the application and shows there is building fabric initiatives to reduce carbon emissions, but the actual placement of a solar panel on the roof isn't something that we can ask for.
Just to say, there is a consultation coming out for building regulations as well with regarding solar panels. So, you know, there may be further requirements in building regulations going forward.
So for the construction impacts during that phase, there is condition 9, which is the standard condition for construction environment management plan. That's, as it is presented, that the limits to what we would ask for, we wouldn't normally ask for consider contractor or constructor procedure, because what we're looking at is the worst of those harms and making sure they are mitigated through consultation with environmental health, and it's a very comprehensive condition there, with a lot of items that would normally be thought of as causing issues, such as dust suppression and noise limitation and construction hour restrictions and such like. In terms of what is a controlled crossing, so what we're talking about when we say controlled crossing, we're talking about signalised. When we talk about uncontrolled, we're basically looking at drop curve and tactile paving, which is what's proposed. In terms of this concern around the eastern parcel, I would just repeat that we do have uses of this land. So, as I said, the Northland is the biodiversity net gain, 30 years safeguard. The land directly south is amenity open space, so that's secured through the legal agreement to be retained for that purpose through the intended obligation. Yeah, and again, the obligation seeks to secure the affordable housing and the delivery of that in a timely way within a staggered point of occupation and completion of the units. Going back to this buffer issue, as I said, we do have the buffer perimeters shown on the site location plan, and we have got that suite of conditions there to ensure that we have direct control over what gets planted in there in terms of planting specification and the schedule for timing of it, and we can ensure that it's robust within the confinements of what is there. If you're thinking of or desiring a bigger buffer to the neighbour to the south, to those properties to the north, to double that, say, you would be looking again quite fundamentally at that layout and whether that's appropriate. I think we got sufficient buffer here for that purpose, which is a neighbour privacy. It's not such a landscape issue because it will end up being between two buildings, the built form. It's there as principally as a screening between a flank elevation of a building, which doesn't have principal windows overlooking, and a deep back garden to existing neighbours to the south with good distance. So I think overall there's not a need to increase that buffer because there's sufficient amenity protection as it is.
Councillor Livingston, another question.
Yeah, the parking issue, I think, I don't know, there seems to be space to the north where 3 or 4 spaces could be moved up and then swap that bit of green space for the bit down south. So the vehicles would be further away from the existing residents then.
Yeah, so the parking provision that's proposed is in excess of highway standards. So whilst we recognise the desire to have more parking, we have to balance that with the usability of that amenity space. Although there is condition on the permission, I think it's condition 32, where we do reserve the final detail of the parking. The purpose of that condition is to ensure the accessible space standards for that minimum 5%. But within that, there could be further discussion about additional visitor parking. But there was more shown originally, and our landscape architect's advice was they would prefer to have less, because what we're trying to do is to make sure that the transition between the edge of the access road and the eastern area is as kept as sort of less urbanising elements are introduced to it. So it's often not great to have a lot of parking lined up there. But I do recognise that that is open space. So it may well be that there could be some opportunity for additional parking there if that is a significant concern.
Thank you. I'll now listen to the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify that this area is neither in my district ward nor in my county division, but I do live within 1.5 miles of it at Monk's Gate and have been there for 21 years. And I've seen the increase in traffic personally in this area. Handcross Road is not any old B road. It is a key local connection between the areas south of Horsham and the A23. And, you know, for things like trips to Gatwick or the coast, and for commuter traffic coming into the town. And the Western Junction with the A281 is already very difficult. At the beginning and the end of the day, the road is very busy, and any children from this development going to the local school would have to cross it at that time. And so the officer has advised us that these crossings that are proposed are absolutely critical. The officer has advised us that an uncontrolled crossing is defined as a lowered curb and tactile pavement, as I understand it. That is not a zebra crossing, is it? And that really concerns me.
Yeah, it's not a zebra crossing, no. But again, and also it's important to note that they're not critical. These are betterments. They have been put forward as a negotiation as part of a request from the local highway authority and us to improve upon an acceptable scheme. So they are at the gift of the developer. The scheme without them was acceptable in highway terms. So yeah, I understand there's a lot of local desire and impetus to try and get a controlled crossing, but unfortunately the justification for it isn't here in this particular application.
Thank you. You could turn your mic off, unless you want to come back, of course. So. Councillor Franklin, sorry.
That's right. Yeah, thanks. So this is where bits I've picked up. Firstly, I do get it that significant development in small residential areas like small villages or tiny villages does have an impact. You know, it really does. I don't think necessarily it may not be a planning issue, but I do get that it raises real concerns, and they are real concerns for local residents. Having said that, yeah, my main issue on this one is also the road crossing. I know that road really well. I cycle up and down it a lot. It is always busy. I'd be really keen to explore if there was any way to to enforce a much safer control of that road in some way, and it may be more than just a controlled crossing. I know it also this development would be in compliance with the developing local plan, and not dissimilar actually to the incomplete parish plan. I'm also encouraged in some way by the very large number of conditions that are in the report that I think would, if complied with, and that's probably where I would have some
concerned that they are complied with, would help assure that this development would be well controlled.
I think it might be prudent to read off directly the quote from the local highway authority about the controlled crossing. So just to quote, considering the scale of the scheme, 30 dwellings, it is not considered a controlled crossing would be justified for development proposed. It is considered the improvements proposed, uncontrolled crossing, dropped curb, tactile paved of the B2110 and the drop curb and the tactile paving included at both Church Access and Fir Tree Close are suitable mitigation in scale and kind to the development proposed as per the statutory planning tests. So obviously we've got an endorsement there from the expert professionals involved with consideration of this, and that's as far as I can take it.
Thank you. Any other members wish to make a comment? Councillor Clark, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I make any comments, I have a question for officers. Luckily, you've got the map up. I can't get my head around the BNG and how that's going to work, because as I understood it, perhaps wrongly, the BNG net gain is dependent on a piece of land that is not under control of the developer, and certainly not in this red boundary area. Or have I misunderstood it? So that's the question for the officers.
Yeah, so it's not within the red line. The BNG delivery is a mix of on-site within the red line in the area previously identified in the north-east corner, but also off-site in that field beyond the red line. It is within the blue line. So for BNG, it doesn't need to be within the red line because it can be controlled through the legal agreement.
Do you want to say what the blue line means?
So the blue line is the ownership. So it's in the applicant's same ownership.
It doesn't show very clearly on the map, that's all.
It's not shown, that's why. It was to avoid confusion. So we've got the red line here on the plan, and basically the furthest tip of that, where the attenuation basin is, that triangular field immediately on the north of the very northernmost tip of the red line, that will be where the off-site BNG is provided within the applicant's control, and that will be all done through the legal agreement. So it's as close as it can be to being on-site and has the benefit of being under the applicant's same ownership. So there's a lot of comfort in that. It's not a credit scheme where it's somewhere else in the district or actually beyond the district. So we're trying to get it as best we can to the area betterment.
Thank you for explaining. So to move on to my comments, looking at this is not meant to sound callous, but I am joining the concern about the crossing of this road because I go down this road and I hear what County Highways said. To draw an example, in Pulborough, for years we said there was a problem with the A29 and the roundabouts on the A29. And for years, County Highways ignored us until a pedestrian was killed. And then suddenly, they changed everything. So I'm a bit concerned, and the question really is, will it take a casualty to get this changed? But it's an unfair point, but I think the other councillors have made a point about the safety of the children crossing here because the school is to the south of the development. So I do have a problem there. Officers have worked very hard on this planning application, and I'm really glad to see things like the link between paragraph 6.46 and condition 3 about the trees, the tree root guards and the rest of it. I do basically have a problem with parking because in 6.79 it makes a big point about other developments in this area. At the end of the day, for rural villages, especially the ones that don't have appropriate common public transport links, parking is a problem. And I really think, as other members have said, that parking needs to be looked at. I heard a developer mention about more numbers. I mean, when, 1,300 plus for the birds, that ain't gonna happen. The evidence doesn't support it. I would point out, though, that the neighbourhood plan of this village went to examination, was passed by the examiner, unlike our district plan. So I would say it has more weight in some ways than our neighbourhood plan, our district plan. So I think we need to bear in mind the neighbourhood plan that was suspended at the behest of this council because of problems with water neutrality and addressing water neutrality. So I don't think that the neighbourhood plan should be, it's not dismissed, but I think it needs to have more weight than what it appears to have been given. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. In terms of the crossing, I think my colleagues made the position of officers clear. I think members have to be clear on the difference between what is necessary to make the development acceptable, and that's based on. Yeah, I think the microphones are in and out, but I speak loud. And what is desired or what is added betterment to the scheme, i.e. it's not required to make the development acceptable, but it would result in a betterment. As my colleague have said, the tactile paving we've secured is already a betterment. And so whilst I completely understand where members are coming from, the difficulty is, how do you secure something in planning terms if we've not got an evidence base to say it's necessary to make the development acceptable? So that's what I would say in terms of parking. And Matt wants to add something.
Sorry, I just wanted to add about the controlled crossing. So just on the slide here, you can see the 3 neighbourhood plan allocations, and the one furthest to the west has been subject to a planning application already. It's a comparable number. It's on the north side of the road, same issues about access to the school. That one didn't require a controlled crossing, even at the request of the parish or ourselves as district officers, and also the highway authority. So I think whilst we're dealing with a bigger number here, in terms of the overall cumulative effect, because this development here is now in the process of being built out, it is a comparable scheme in terms of identifying where is the safety need for the controlled crossing.
And then in terms of parking, it's gone off again. Can you bring the layout out? In terms of parking, I think, as my colleague have said, there is possibility to secure additional parking if that's a concern of members. That was a negotiation point, because it's always a balance between the level of landscaping you have, the quality of the built environment versus more parking. If that was fundamental to members' concerns, even though obviously it's still above the county standards, you could provide some more parking in the scheme, but clearly that would be at a compromise of landscaping. So I think that's really for members to consider. In terms of the neighbourhood plan, it certainly is a significant material consideration, even though it's not made. I think my colleagues showed the criteria in the policy and how that's relevant and how those have been considered. But the fact is, it's not made, and clearly that's of no fault of the parish, and nobody's saying it is. And we have a significant short of housing land supply with an updated figure of 1 year, which is incredibly low. And this development complies with the facilitating appropriate development document. And whilst the emerging local plan carries limited weight, and we've all seen the letter from the inspectorate, ultimately there was still an evidence base behind that. And the evidence base demonstrated that this site is sustainable, which again is a consideration of this application. So all those matters combined, officers have come to the view that this application is acceptable.
Sorry, and also just to add, we're not saying that there's conflict with the neighbourhood plan. There is compliance, because when you see the scheme overlaid, you can see that, so the dark blue is the neighbourhood plan allocation, and the slightly bluer is the emerging local plan. So the concentration of quantum is within that neighbourhood plan allocation. What it's done is, obviously, it's extended into the field adjacent for the purposes of compliance with the emerging allocation in the local plan. But in terms of compliance with the neighbour plan, it is providing the housing where it has been identified. And also the neighbourhood plan is based on older housing evidence need than our local plan. So although we've afforded them similar weight, you could be saying that actually the neighbourhood plan is is based on older evidence.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I think actually what I was going to ask has already been covered. I was just going to make a comment about controlled crossings. I remember well in Southwater when the Roundstone Caravan Park application came before the planning committee. We argued strongly for a crossing there to the bus stop, which is directly opposite, and it's for elderly people, and we were told it wasn't required. And neither was a refuge in the middle of the road. So we will wait and see what happens, but I do have huge sympathy with crossing these busy roads. I was just going to ask a very simple question. This application says it's a departure from the development plan. Could the head of development just explain what that actually means?
So whilst our housing policies and our current Horsham District Planning Framework are out of date, it is still our current development plan. So you know, our I've forgotten the date of it now, 1815, Claire would know. So it's not allocated in that. So because it's not an allocation in that, it's a technical departure. And that means in accordance to our constitution, they're automatically brought to committee, notwithstanding other matters. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follop, yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Likewise, I'm very sympathetic to the need to a more controlled crossing, and I recognise that highways have recommended what they have. But I just wanted to ask, I mean, what actually is the delta, especially in cost, between a controlled crossing where drivers are required to stop and an uncontrolled one they're not? I mean, looking on a website, a UK website, it's literally paint and two lights, and that I just don't see why. You know, what's the cost? A few £100 to Sussex? I don't quite know what it is, and if it is in the grand scheme of things a nominal cost to go from controlled to uncontrolled to controlled, let's just add it. You know, the driver being required to stop makes a massive difference in the safety of the pedestrian.
We don't have the figures in front of us, but the point is not so much the cost, it's to do with necessity in terms of a planning test. So we have a local highway authority who's looked at the evidence submitted in terms of road safety, that's speeds, pedestrian crossing, accident history, and they do not believe that there's it can be substantiated from a safety issue to require a controlled crossing. So it would therefore be not necessary to make the development acceptable to meet the planning tests. So it would fail the obligations for that reason.
But again, we have a room full of people, including from the parish councils, who really beg to differ. And I know that we have to accept their evidence, but at the same time, if it is that notional one person getting killed to change their minds, let's just avoid it. And I see we could add a simple condition to our approval to say, make it a controlled crossing. I don't see it's going to break their bank.
I'm not sure if members have read the email I sent them around that appeal decision and substantiating your evidence, but anyway, it rings to mind. What I would say is I'd be completely uncomfortable of members adding a condition and saying, just can you have a controlled crossing? I think, you know, if that was such a critical issue, it would need to be deferred and discussed again with highways. You know, that we don't know what the costs are, but also we don't know whether it's even technically possible. I'm not a highway engineer. I don't know what the requirements are, what you need in place, you know, what whether there's insurance matters, I have no idea, and therefore we simply cannot add a condition on, in my professional opinion, without further specialist technical input. I think to do so would be unreasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's correct. I go to Gatley's fairly regularly. I've never really had any problems coming out of the car park. I mean, it is a busy road, but I think one needs to be a little bit careful about overstating that.
Any other comments from any of the members? Dennis, sorry, Councillor Livingston, sorry.
Yeah, we talk about evidence, specialist evidence. So if parish council were to contact specialist consultants and do the various surveys, they could put a case up for a controlled crossing if the evidence was there. And then perhaps maybe worth deferring this until that was done.
I think it would be unreasonable to defer an application based on a piece of evidence that we don't have, that's not been commissioned, that we have no timescales for. I think you have to make a decision on the basis of the information available at that time. Clearly, if that's a separate piece of work the parish council wished to conduct and discuss with West Sussex County Council as highway engineers, then obviously that's open to them to do so. But I would caution deferring an application that is relying on an evidence base from a third party that we have no information on. Thank you.
That they also may have some success in the traffic regulation order, so they might not be able to get the signalised crossing, but in conversation with county, the parish may be able to get traffic calming measures along this stretch.
Okay, Councillor Trollope.
Could we, at the very minimum, issue an advisory that it be reassessed? I mean,
It's open to members to add an informative on regarding the consideration of a signalised crossing, but obviously that's not a condition, it wouldn't be a requirement. Obviously the applicants are here today listening, so I'm sure that's something that they would take away and consider. Thank you.
I would happily put forward a motion that we add an informative.
In a moment, Councillor Trollope. Councillor Vickers.
Just like to add that on other applications, we've asked for West Sussex to do a safety audit on completion of development, and that has been accepted by West Sussex.
Yeah, so that would be a standard thing. So that this application has been accompanied by a road safety audit, and it has been signed off by county in a pre-design stage.
Sure.
So there will be a further stage upon the completion of the works.
Thank you.
Councillor Trollope.
Yes, I mean, I would like to put forward the motion that we include an informative to West Sussex County that
Okay, we need a wording for that.
Just to say, members, because it's an informative, it's not part of the actual decision. We don't need a vote on that. But I think as officers, if you know, there seems to be general agreement, members can add an informative, and we can always share the wording. I guess we'll have to turn it around quite quickly, I think, won't we? But yeah, we can, if that's helpful, but we can draft something based on the conversation today.
Councillor Mercer, yes.
I just want to add to that an informative may well then add to any case that the parish council wishes to make in relation to traffic calming measures, and I think that would be helpful.
Can we capture those in the minutes, please, that informative? Okay, I am now proposing to go to the vote on this. And the recommendation is to approve full planning permission subject to completion of the legal agreement and conditions set out in the committee report. Just remind Councillor Livingston you were able to vote. Therefore, all those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Okay. All those against? Okay. Any abstentions?
4, 13 against, 1, and no abstentions.
Therefore, the application has been approved in line with the recommendation from the officers. Thank you. I will just allow a 2-minute break, but members, please do not engage with members of the public, and it is for to top up any water you need in particular. Okay. Agenda item number 7, DC 220661, allotment garden, Stopham Road, Pulborough. The Vice Chair will chair this item. And item number 8, as I'm not allowed to vote on those, and if there is a tied vote, it is down to the Chair. So I will hand over this item to the Vice Chair, Councillor van der Burg.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll move straight to the presentation.
Thank you. This application relates to a site off Stopham Road on the edge of Pulborough, and members' attention is drawn to the committee addendum and the relevance of the annual monitoring report. The site benefits from an extant planning permission which includes residential development, a new commuter car park and related highway works. The application proposes a series of amendments to the residential element of the scheme and to the phasing of conditions. This is the approved layout for the housing, with the proposed amendments set out in paragraph 6.3 of the report. So looking at the eastern section of the site, the approved on the left, proposed on the right, the overall layout isn't dissimilar to what exists through the current planning permission, with some of the changes relating to plot 20, which is the entrance building, going from a curved to an angled frontage, and the building opposite, plots 22 and 23, again going from a curved frontage to an offset angled form. Moving to the west of the site, the layout changes include previously detached dwellings being replaced by semi-detached pairs, and the omission of flat roofs, garages and rear projections. In terms of the elevations, this is the building at the entrance to the site, and the previously approved curved building is top left and new angled frontage bottom left, showing what's been changed there, with further changes relating to the roof form, some of the detailing around windows and the use of brick rather than render. Taken as a whole, there are no objections to the proposed amendments to the layout or design of the proposed dwellings. In terms of water neutrality, the existing planning permission creates a viable fallback position, and it has been demonstrated that the amended scheme would not result in any increased water consumption. The final change is an amendment to the phasing of conditions 3 and 4 of the existing planning permission, which secure a series of highway works. So this is the wording of the current planning permission, which had a trigger for details to be provided prior to the commencement of development. As development has though commenced on site, there has been a technical breach of these conditions, and it's therefore recommended the trigger be amended to require details to be provided prior to ground floor slab level taking place. The amendment, which is conditions 2 and 3 of the current recommendation, doesn't change the requirements of the condition and what's being provided, merely to trigger for it to be submitted to us for approval. The application is recommended for approval as set out in the officer's report.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker on this. Maria Wright, please.
Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all. My name is Maria Wright and I work at MH Architects, working as part of a project team with Stonewater on this scheme. Stonewater own the site and are looking to develop it as a 100% affordable scheme. Stonewater is one of the UK's largest social housing providers, whose goal is to offer high quality affordable homes for people whose needs are not met by the open market. Every home Stonewater built is designed to be affordable to own, rent and maintain. And as you can hopefully see from our proposals for the Stopham Road development, homes people can be proud of and want to live in the long term. The site already has planning permission, and the changes we have proposed are minor ones that address changes in regulations and seek to improve buildability and maintenance of the project, including providing a wheelchair accessible dwelling. I would like to outline just some of the many positive aspects of this scheme. The site is sustainably located within the community and will offer 29 low-energy affordable homes for those with a local connection. The car parking proposed is in accordance with the County Council's standards, and each home has an amenity space. The proposed home's energy demands will be lowered by adopting a fabric-first approach to sustainability, including air source heat pumps and electric vehicle charging with no gas to be utilized on site. This creates a highly sustainable development and ensures that the property's running costs are affordable for our families. The new homes will also meet the requirements for water neutrality through the inclusion of water-saving measures throughout the homes and by installing water-saving measures to stormwater's existing homes in the local area. A fully accessible wheelchair home is provided, reflecting an identified need in the local area. The design presents a sympathetic and contextual response to the site using local materials respectful of those around it. Finally, the schemes conforms to Horsham's planning policies and will help 29 local households into a home of their own, which is safe, warm, and affordable, in an area they know and love and to which they have a local connection. Thank you for your time, and we sincerely hope that you can support the officer's recommendation to approve this proposal.
Very good. Thank you, Maria. I shall open, well, I don't think there's anything you want to add. Anybody want to say anything? Councillor Reddy.
I have a particular interest in affordable homes, and recent information that I've got from having responsibility for the housing list is that family dwellings, 3 and 4 bedroom houses at the moment, people on our housing list could wait 4 or 5 years, but the projection is very shortly by 2030 that could be 12 years. So making sure that we've got affordable family homes in communities, and it was very pleasing to see that some of those will be wheelchair accessible, means that will be people who, if this goes ahead, will get homes who, in the current climate with our local plan and water neutrality, have a real risk of not having a home. And so I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raby. Councillor Manton.
Thank you, Jim. I noticed that the speaker mentioned sort of sustainable with EV charge points and air source heat pumps. I wondered whether there was going to be any photovoltaic cells on the roofs or batteries.
Councillor.
No, the proposed elevations don't include photovoltaics, though.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I've been involved with this development since, well, more than 10 years. For the history, for the members who don't know the history, because obviously they wouldn't, this was originally the site of the old allotments. It then became, for the parish council, when I was a parish councillor, a prime example of a rural exception site. And basically the parish council wanted this developed as a rural exception site. Councillor Brian Donnelly and myself, when I was a brand new councillor, basically ignored the advice from planning officers and basically pushed this site to be developed in terms of affordable housing and basically supporting the local population. And also what made it acceptable was a load of other things that haven't been mentioned in this, but I will mention them to give you the context. So the things that came as part of this was, 1, a car park provision on the west side of the station. If you put the map up, it would be helpful. Thank you. Which is the green bit. Platform access to the London-bound train, because at the moment you can't access the London-bound train except down a very steep staircase. So it's basically, if you're in a wheelchair or something, you have to go to Billingshurst to catch a train to London. The bridge under the railway is very narrow, and basically pedestrians who were either accessing their homes or parked cars in the Stopham Road basically were taking their lives in their hands because basically they were walking against the traffic. As part of the conditions, basically that has been addressed by this planning application when it was first passed. The bit in the green, which you can just see below, was land was provided for the people who live in Stopham villas, which is below the road, for them to park their cars in, and it was allocated to them so they could park their cars. And finally, to mitigate and to stop people parking on the Stopham Road and churning out the verges and basically obstructing traffic, basically there was a plan to put in parking measures to force car parkers for the station to go and use the car park. And finally, access to the signal box, which the Pulborough Partnership is looking to take over because it is a historic building. It's a listed building and it's one of the only ones left in the country. So just to put it into context, this is really important for the village. The Transport and Infrastructure Plan group, which I am the leader of, basically a group between parish council, district council and county council. This is part of their strategic objective to deliver on these things. So this development is important, I think, to underline so that you understand the importance of this development to the community more than just affordable housing. There's a lot more stuff comes with it. The only comment I would make on the new development is it's a question of taste, isn't it? Some people might think it's a better one. I don't, but I'm not, the parish council is not very happy about it being only social housing. They wanted more mixed housing. But at the end of the day, my comment is, you know, I can live with it. And the comments I've just made apply to the next one on the agenda as well, by the way, just so you get two for the price of one. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Lots of positives there. Would anybody like to raise anything negative, or should we just move to a vote? Let's move to a vote. Okay, to approve the application, all those in favour, please. And, oh. Those against? Any abstentions? 2 ward members unable. Did we get the number?
It's anonymous. Yes.
Anonymous. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll move straight on to the next one. S106 106 22 0010. So it's the same site. Presentation, please.
Thank you. This application relates to the Section 106 agreement for development subject of agenda item 7, where modification is sought to allow the scheme to be provided as 100% affordable housing. This modification would provide still relief, meaning that just under £350,000 of funding for infrastructure improvements could no longer be secured. It is, though, considered that the benefit of securing additional affordable housing on the site would outweigh the loss of these contributions. It is also proposed to modify the agreement to update the timing of the highway obligations to reflect the amended conditions of item 7, and those are conditions 2 and 3, as well as updating standard wording within the agreement. These changes would not alter the works being secured by the agreement or the timing for their completion. It is therefore recommended that the agreement be modified as set out in the report.
Thank you. Would anybody like to raise an issue on this? I think we'll move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question of law. If you have a planning application that then gets started and key conditions are not met, the question is, does this invalidate the planning permission and basically you go back to square one, or do you just ignore it, or do you just try and mitigate it and sort of skate around the issue? I guess that's probably one for the solicitor.
I think you're going to need to explain the question. I'm not really quite sure what the facts are of this particular case.
Yeah, so in this application, development commenced by carrying out works in the proposed commuter car park in terms of respective drainage, but the details required by these 2 conditions weren't discharged prior to those works commencing. But in this case, you can lawfully commence an application without necessarily discharging all the pre-commencement conditions, as long as those pre-commencement conditions don't get to the heart of the permission. So on this site, there are other pre-commencement conditions relating to land levels, drainage contamination, and the like, all of which were discharged, and which couldn't have been discharged necessarily had development commenced. But in this case, the 2 conditions in question on the screen, there was no reason why they had to be discharged prior to works commencing, and you could still discharge them at a later date. So we're satisfied the development was could be argued to be lawfully commenced, and we're changing the trigger points of these 2 conditions as a procedural matter to tidy it up, basically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No hands. Jolly good. All of those in favour, please. Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, I shall now hand back to the chairman.
Thank you very much. Item number 9, which is DC 250366, is a drill hall, Dean Road, Horsham. This is in the Dean ward, therefore, when it comes to the vote, Councillor Trott, you will not be able to vote. Please could the officer make the presentation, please?
Yeah, so this application relates to the drill hall on Den Road, which currently provides a community facility with a main hall and meeting rooms and offices. The application seeks a mixed use of the building, which would allow for the existing community use in addition to formalising use as a place of worship. The proposal would retain the community use of the building, with the areas in yellow on the attached ground floor plan remaining available for public use during certain times of the week. The change of use raises no policy conflict and no concerns relating to highways or water neutrality, and conditions are recommended in respect of operating hours and the use of amplified music to protect neighbouring amenity. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Councillor Vickers, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that Councillor Cheryl Sweeney, who is one of the local members here, supports the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trott, yes.
Whilst I realise I'm embargoed from voting on this, I do obviously have an opinion. Yeah, anybody who knows me and my history will know that I do. And I just remember in 1988, I walked through the doors of that TA centre, which was the start of a 35-year journey into the military and conflict. So I have a very special interest in that particular building. And I also remember in 2002 advising the MOD Options for Change Committee that it would be foolhardy to get rid of it as a TA centre, now called Reserve Centre, because the wheel will turn and it will be needed again. And lo, it came to pass 15 years later that we did need it again, and so the Sussex-based Reserve Army unit was based in Crawley, not Horsham. But anyway, it's no good dwelling on the past. I feel it's sad the way the drill hall is now. It could be a much better community asset. I know that technically it is still a community asset, but I think with much reduced utility for the community. And so it is, though if I were to vote, I would be supporting this application. It is, I have to register the fact that it is a shame the way it's turned out and that it can't be a fully utilised community asset. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. I would simply like to ask the officers about 111, which is the proposed hours of operation, in particular the 7 AM start, both during the week and on Fridays and Saturdays. Is that acceptable in terms of normal such things? I mean, clearly the drill hall is surrounded by residential sites, and 7 o'clock is quite early in the morning.
Yeah, so the application was accompanied by a noise assessment, which monitored noise from a building against existing background noise levels. And it essentially found that even the noisiest time of use, which was typically associated with church, didn't exceed background noise levels. So you wouldn't expect use to be audible from neighbouring properties. So although it is earlier than currently exists, it's not expected to cause any harm.
Any other members wishing to ask questions or comment on this application? No? Okay, therefore we'll go to the vote on this. And the recommendation is to approve full planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the committee report. All those for? No abstentions? No against? Okay, therefore the recommendation to approve full planning permission subject to conditions set out in the committee report is approved. Thank you. No urgent business, but finally I'd like to thank the officers and the members for their contribution this evening and wish you all a safe journey home. And apologies for problems with the sound and some of the visual words that we didn't get earlier. And Act 1920, I bring the first meeting of the newly formed Planning Committee to a close. Thank you very much.